Hey,
Hey, here we go. Calling
there we
Chris
go.
Anderson in London.
This is Chris Anderson in Tier 4 London.
Uh, you
How's Rick
know,
Byer in Chicago?
in Chicago, Chris, it's a new year. It's
Yeah,
2021. I don't know if you've caught that.
I've heard.
Yeah, and it's we've got your Tier 4. You got Brexit. We've got
It's
election
happening.
madness,
It's happening.
and
It's happening.
there's a lot of good stuff to want to escape from and get into History Happy Hour.
That sounds a good idea. Good
So it
idea.
seems like a really good plan here. And you realize this is our second calendar year of History Happy
I
Hour.
know. It's spanning the globe now, too.
Spanning the globe, we've almost circled back to where we were a year ago. Come March, we
No,
will.
a year ago, I was on my way to the tropics.
Right. So that Facebook post came up today when you stopped here in Chicago on your way there, and we visited the U-505 and the
That's
First Division
awesome.
Museum in Cantini, and we just look 10 years younger and 20 years happier. But anyway, welcome everybody to History Happy Hour. And of course, we're here talking about history every Sunday, except for last Sunday, on the Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours Facebook and YouTube pages. And we do appreciate Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours making those pages available to us. And all of our broadcasts are archived on the History Happy Hour webpage. So if you're looking for 40 hours of something to do, you can go back and look at every show that we've done.
Just remember, all the shows that you guys were watching earlier last year, they couldn't keep filming because of COVID. So you're going to run out of things to watch soon. So
So
we'll be there.
History Happy Hour, and you can think, if you've seen the shows already, you can think of it as just enjoying the reruns now.
There you go.
And finding those great moments you remember and coming back to them. So let us know that you're here, and we see a bunch of people joining us, Libby and Lizzie and Kathy, Nancy and Brian, Jim Latin with his friend Mark Lewis, Doug McCord, Nancy Ken, Marcus. We got a whole crew of people. And that's not even the people who are sitting here on hold waiting to
know.
go in the show. So we better get started, Chris. Right?
But, yep, it's time. The bar is open for the first time in 2021.
Bars open for the first time in 2021. Here's to that. Here's to the Ghost Army. Let's just get it started with right away. Chris, our topic today is war movies,
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
and our guests are members of our audience.
Are many and proud.
Tell us how that came to be.
Well, Rick and I were brainstorming first about our Christmas vacation, which we, decided to take some time off. But we thought, what is the thing that all of our viewers have been doing during lockdown, and that is watching a lot of movies. So we wanted to combine one of our favorite activities during lockdown, watching TV, with getting together with some of our friends, and we've been hoping for quite a while now to get some of you who've been so nice to watch us week after week to come live, greet everybody in person. And so we thought, what a great idea. We'll talk about war movies.
And we'll see if it's a great idea.
Well, we'll see if it's a great idea. If not, it'll never
Right.
happen again.
It seems like when war movies are I don't know if you have an instant take on war movies. They're popular. They're very dramatic. They're not necessarily a great way to learn history,
No.
but they're fun.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, and this will shock some of you, I'm sure, but I'm not a big fan of war movies as a rule, and much less the older I get, because I don't really think that they can convey what is really going on. But I think when they're good, they can help talk about human personality and how humans interact with an event like that. So they have a place. So it has to be a really good movie to impress me.
Well, I like to think that war movies are about the feeling, right? I mean, they're trying to capture something. A book can give you a lot of information, and a book is probably a better way to go when you're looking at for actual facts. but sometimes to get a feeling and to try to capture something that a book doesn't capture, maybe a movie is a better way to do it. And do you like, by the way, the fancy new graphic?
I was going to comment on that. I am very impressed, Rick.
There you go. I got a slew of them. But what we decided to do is divide this show into segments. And so our first segment that we're going to bring on some people to talk about their favorite movie is entitled "You're in the Army Now." And this is a segment which is loosely about the European theater of operations in World War II. And so I'm gonna through the magic of television here, try to join us with some of the people who are going to come on and talk to us about that. And welcome all you guys.
Hello.
This is suddenly a very populated TV screen here. I'm gonna maybe we can start with let's see. I'm just making sure who's here. With Scott.
Yes.
And Scott, tell us about the movie that you selected, which I think is a real interesting choice.
It's one that I never heard of before I went on the Band of Brothers tour with Chris. And when we were heading into Arnhem, I think he showed it to the bus, and it was Theirs Is the Glory. And it was a hard movie to find. I had to go online to find it. And I think I actually had to buy it from an overseas vendor. But it was what struck me, what I like about it, it was actually filmed in Arnhem and Oosterbeek a little over a year after the war was over, using the same individuals that fought in that battle. They went back and recreated the battle in the town of Arnhem and Oosterbeek. So it was filmed on location with the men and women with the men that fought in that battle. And it just struck me as so strange just seeing the places that we went to on the tour. And it just made me wonder how those men felt and reacted going back to that location and reenacting that battle. Always struck me as how emotional that had to be to them. Yeah. And it was just, I find myself watching it over and over. I don't know if we classify it as a movie, Chris, or more of a documentary.
Well, no, it was considered a movie at the time when it came out.
Yeah.
But it does have kind of a documentary feel to it, right? Yeah. And a lot of also original footage from the war in it.
Right. And just going back and on movie scenes, they have to create it. They went back and the town was still in the form of destruction that it was left in after the battle and the war. So it was about as real as you could get in the action and in the scenery that you saw. And it just like us going to the museum there and going through it and then seeing it, a year after the battle, how it looked in. I mean, I talked with Chris before about I like before and after magazines of war. I mean, that's about as live as you can get right there.
So, Scott, some folks have asked, and just so people know, Theirs Is the Glory is about the British airborne operation at Arnhem and Oosterbeek in September of 1944. And even before the end of the war, it was famous. It had become a pivotal moment to the British. So they did a movie of the battle, and what they did is they took the soldiers that had been there during the fight, they went back to where the battle had fought, and basically restaged it dramatically.
Right.
So that's the background of that movie.
And there's a pretty incredible thing in there that I like. There's a Canadian broadcaster named Stanley Maxted, and he's in the movie broadcasting there. And then I went back and listened to some of his real broadcasts. He's broadcasting when they're dropping the airborne supplies, and that's a pretty amazing.
All they ask are for the bullets to continue the fight.
Right. So I want to. We're going to find today that we're going to be moving real fast, and I do want to move on because people at the end of the show are going to be like, "What about us?" But Colin, you selected a movie that I think is probably a lot more well known than Theirs Is the Glory. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I selected The Great Escape. It's been out for a number of years. I saw it a long time ago when I was much younger. Probably the thing that gets me initially is this is based on true events in during the war. Uh, I'm sure there was a little bit of Hollywood introduced into it, but I still thought it was an excellent movie. First of all, it had a remarkable cast, a lot of good actors in it. And they were all, the prisoners were doing their best to carry on the war in their own way, even though they were prisoners. They worked well together, they cooperated, everybody had a particular job, and they were very innovative in what they needed to do to dig their tunnel and to escape. It just, they're still fighting the war. They're still trying to tie up German resources so they can't do battle somewhere else. Ultimately, it wasn't horribly successful. It did have some success, but not to the extent they really wanted it to. To me, it was just a movie that I've watched many, many, many times,
Sure.
and I probably see something new every time I watch it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that it strikes me when I go to where the original camp was, and you talk to the curator there, he's very specific, and he says that these men had no real thought that they would escape, make it back to England, and continue the fight. This was simply a way for them to distract the Germans, tie up resources, and they viewed it as a military operation. They
Really did.
Yeah.
So yeah, and a great film, and it's of course there's Richard Attenborough, is it Richard Attenborough or David? I get the mix up. Richard Attenborough, who's in that film, who then later directs A Bridge Too Far. So kind of an interesting connection between those two films. Murray, you had a film that not a film actually, a TV series that was, you had a film too, but a TV series that was number one on your list, and I thought it was a great suggestion. So tell us about that. It was not Band of Brothers, by the way, everybody.
No,
So,
it's actually it's not a movie, but it was a series that when I was growing up, I had a lot of influence on why I became interested in World War II, and it's the series Combat, which was back in the early 60s to I think 62 to 67. Now I remember it. I was a young boy, actually about 7, 8 years old, watching that and thinking, about World War II and the courage that they had to have back then. Even though it wasn't that accurate of TV series, because they had D-Day in the middle of the series somewhere, I think third season or something. But it made it look like a flashback. But they also had, they spent 5 years in their ETO.
slogging through
Okay.
the ETO there.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's that, but, it was still an interesting show for a 7, 8-year-old to watch back then and see Sergeant Saunders and Lieutenant Hanley and the men. And you always knew the new guy in the squad was going to be the
I was
one
going to say.
fought for the Germans
Oh,
later
really?
on.
So it was realistic in that way.
I remember when
Right.
I remember they would play it reruns on TV, and I remember at one point had all my toy soldiers on the floor and turning to my grandmother and saying, pointing to people on the screen, going, "That one's going to die. That one's going to die. That one's going to die."
Right.
And she's like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, because they weren't on the last show. Because they're the ones that are going to get it."
Yeah, they weren't the regulars on the show. So.
I think a lot of us, combat was kind of one of our first introductions to World War II. And the thing that, when I think back on it, it always seems like it's one platoon or squad, really, sort of on their own. It doesn't, you sort of feel like they're
Right.
often just sort of wandering through the woods of France for years,
Like
coming across
they won the
various
war.
situations.
They won the war by themselves, you think?
the other thing is-
And also Rat Patrol was on there too.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good
Oh,
that
Rat
too.
Patrol is a great show. Loved that show.
That one was 100% accurate. That was. So just
I
clear
wanted
that
it
up
to
right
be.
now.
I wanted it to be. I wanted one of those Jeeps. I wanted to be bouncing
All right.
around the sand
That's
dunes.
right.
So, Gene, you're our last presenter
Oh,
in this
boy.
category. Last but not least,
Right.
but tell us about your selection.
It took me a long time, and it was Dirty Dozen versus The Great Escape versus, Guns of Navarone versus Force 10 from Navarone. And I really struggled with it, and I was like, you know what? The Force 10 from Navarone was a really strange and different cast, but the physics behind the end with the dam bursting kind of helped me move into a science background. So something completely off that wasn't part of the war movie itself, but helped me to decide to become a chemistry major and then an optometrist. So the war movie was something completely different from my thing too.
So, Gene, one would have thought that an exploding dam would have led you into pyrotechnics. I don't
I
know.
know. No, I knew better than that one. So
Well, any movie with Harrison Ford and and what's his name? Who was
Carl
in
Lewis and
who was in Jaws? Wasn't the guy
Yeah.
Shaw? Right,
Robert
Right.
Shaw.
Robert Shaw.
Shaw.
Any movie with Harrison Ford and Robert Shaw has to have something going on there.
yep.
And so,
So,
go ahead,
of course-
Chris.
well, I was going to say the big question is, Rick, is inquiring minds want to know what your favorite movie of the ETO is.
Oh, I didn't really think through that question.
Gotcha.
But
Put him on the spot.
Exactly.
instead of saying my favorite movie, I'm going to throw out my friend Jim Lattin's favorite movie from the ETO.
Oh,
Because I
Another
know,
cop-out.
I know it's such a favorite of yours, Chris.
Oh, you know.
oh no, it can't be Patton. 'Cause
Oh,
please don't let
yes,
it be
it's-
Patton.
It's Patton, and my friend Jim, who's on with us on the show, watching and commenting. So keep that in mind. Be gentle. But Jim is a fan of Patton, not for the history, which he recognizes as flawed, but for the performance of George C. Scott and for the fabulous soundtrack. And I gotta say, I agree with him on both those counts. But Chris, you got 30 to 45 seconds to plaster us, so go for it.
Well, no, I admire George C. Scott's portrayal of Patton. He makes a much better Patton than Patton was in reality.
I can say that all the books that we've read recently about this era kind of thing put
Yeah.
some different light, especially, people who wanted to use the Ghost Army and not use the Ghost Army.
Yeah. See? Oh, yeah.
There you
Nicely done.
go. There you go.
Rick, you didn't drink yet.
I like
Yeah.
it. No, I think that I think the movie built up the reputation of someone whose reputation was too big anyway. Now, I'm
What's
gonna-
yours, Chris?
Mine.
What? Yeah.
My
The lover
favorite.
of war movies.
Yes, my favorite movie about the ETO is Battleground,
That
which
was
is
on my
the-
list.
which is the movie about the glider regiment in Bastogne with Van Johnson, and a couple of reasons why I like it. One is it came out in 1949, right after the war, and it's one of the first post-war movies where they try to show what young men endure in combat, and they show young Americans doing things that soldiers do, like run away, try to get off the line, dig a deeper hole. And so for the time that movie came out, that was a shocking thing for Americans to see. So I really, that struck me. And so that's one of my favorites.
I want
It
to
also
thank you.
remind of me how the platoon interacts, how they get together.
Right.
And then at times, tense times, they squabble, but when it counts, they all came together.
Well, and in fact, they
Seen
make
that
a lie
movie.
when they talk. Always is that one scene where they say, we're fighting for mom and apple pie, with just the sarcasm oozing out of their characters. And think about when they're saying that,
We
1949.
found a home in the Army.
Yeah, that's
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here in our first segment. And we're going to say goodbye to you, but we appreciate your joining us. We hope you'll watch the rest of the show and throw your comments in. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to pop you off, so forgive me.
you.
But
Happy
there
New
you,
Year.
Bye.
there you go.
take care, guys. Thank you.
I'll
Take
put you
care.
guys off, and I hope I don't pop off anybody I'm not supposed to here. Wow, it's just us, Chris.
Well, I can say what you wanted to say when I was cutting you off. I apologize for.
I did say it. I wanted to move on to the next segment. So, and I'm just going to make sure that we have some room here for the other people. This is a technical nightmare.
Tour de force.
Yeah,
it's a technical tour de
something.
force.
So, okay. So let's see if we can bring on some people for our next section. Our next session, first of all, is section, I can't talk straight, is called Keep the Home Fires Burning. And it is stories, again, from World War II, which is a fairly common theme in this show, from the home front or the occupation. So I'm going to bring in here, and let's see how well we do it.
All right.
We've got Bruce,
Hey.
and we've got Amanda, and we've
Right.
got Deanne, and I think we've got Terry also joining us here.
Hey.
Woo. I think we've done that. Wow.
All right. You're getting better.
We've had more guests now in this show than we had in the first 10 weeks of the season, Chris.
We're stocking up.
We're doing pretty good, I think. Let's start here, Deanne, with you, because you've got a selection that I think is probably a favorite for many people.
Thank you. Yes, my selection is Mrs. Miniver. It was the 1942 Academy Award winning motion picture for Best Picture, Best Actress. It's set in a fictional town in London. It's sort of the idyllic British family, mom, dad, 3 kids, beautiful village. And it takes place during the beginning of the war between Britain and Germany. The thing, I guess, that draws me into the film is it's centered on the mother of the family, and it really tells the story from her point of view. And it sort of speaks to me because I have a son who's of the age where if we ever went to war, he would be draft eligible. So I can really put myself in the shoes of Mrs. Miniver. Her oldest son enlists in the Royal Air Force and engages in combat, and so you can see the stress that places on her and the family, but she handles it gracefully. She tries to keep the family together and having as normal a life as you can when you're getting bombed every once in a while. And
Sure.
son is off on dangerous missions, so it's anyway.
And her husband goes and does the Dunkirk thing.
He does. He disappears with the boat for a
With the
while
boat
and
that
comes back.
they just
Right,
happen to
there's
have.
Right, and there's a German soldier that happens to get shot down.
As
near
they
her
do.
home.
As they do.
He's
Yes.
a very bad milk drinker. I just want to say.
So, and just real quick, it was purely a propaganda piece, but they don't say anything nasty about the Germans the entire film. Even the German character is not mean and vicious, but it's a pure propaganda piece that worked on me. I'm sure at the time people thought how admired the British resolve and courage, and were inspired or wanted to get involved and
Sure.
help the Europeans out.
One of the things I read about that movie was, it's ironic that all the British people talk about Mrs. Miniver like it's a British movie, but it's really not. It's an American-made movie.
Yes.
And one of the things I was reading was that the scene in the garden when Mrs. Miniver finds the German, as war approached, they kept reshooting the scene so she would be more assertive, because there were people in Hollywood saying we might get involved in the war and the Germans might be our enemies. So they actually reshot that scene again and again and again until December 7th.
Wow.
Well, and I thought you made a great point, Deanne, that there's not really a harsh word about the Germans in there, but even Joseph Goebbels commented famous movie critic Joseph Goebbels commented that it was a very effective piece of propaganda that didn't say anything negative about the Germans, but was nonetheless very, very effective. So I thought that that was kind of a really kind of an interesting statement on it. Amanda, are you there? Can you hear us? Okay.
I can hear you.
You have a sort of a British home front movie, but it's kind of different than
Yes.
Mrs. Miniver. So tell us about your choice.
So my choice is actually a Netflix original movie from 2018. It's the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. The book, it was originally a book turned into a movie for Netflix, and it is about a writer from London who goes to the island of Guernsey and learns about what they endured during the occupation. She learns all about this society that had to be created in order for the main characters to meet and gather and share resources. They were low on food. The Germans had ravished everything they had, and they used this fake book club in the beginning as an opportunity to get together. Eventually, it led to them reaching out, looking for more books, and finding a true passion in books. The reason I like it so much as a war movie is because it's not your common war movie. It's not guns and bombs and Germans and the British. It's a movie about that. It's actually kind of a love story too. So it's great because it appeals to a different type of audience that might not watch a normal war movie, but it still gives everybody some education on what it was like during the occupation.
Yeah, and go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say all the ladies in my life, the Anderson women, that's their favorite movie. We watch it all the time, and we're hoping to get to Guernsey once we can go anywhere.
And once you get there, you won't
Yes, it
recognize
looks like a
any
beautiful
place
place.
I know.
from that movie because it wasn't shot in Guernsey. Believe
I
it or
know,
not,
Rick.
it was shot.
Thanks,
in
Rick. Thanks for the
Cornwall.
spoiler alert, Rick.
The pleasure is always mine,
Yes.
Chris.
Anybody
But,
else that wants to talk about their favorite movie, just leave before Rick spoils it for you.
So okay, thanks, fine. Well, we'll stay in Europe here for a TV series that Bruce wants to tell us about that I had never heard of, but sounds really interesting. It's definitely on my list. But before I get to Bruce, I just want to say to everybody who's watching, and I see people putting up comments, and tell us your favorites, comment on our favorites, keep that conversation going, because if we get boring, then you can always go over there and look at the comments, and whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, let us know what you think and what you're feeling. But Bruce, tell us about your selection.
Yeah, I was introduced to this movie by my mother, who actually lived in Europe during World War II, and this is called The Heavy Water War, and it was produced more recently, just in the last 5-6 years or so. But this was a 6-series TV drama that is depicting how, when the Germans were trying to develop the atomic bomb, they realized they needed the heavy water isotope, that their best source was occupied Norway. There was a factory up in Norway that had it as a byproduct from fertilizer and aluminum production and various things, and they needed this heavy water. And so they're obviously getting that for their research. And what is so intriguing here, beyond the fact that it's just gorgeous cinematography and great acting, but it was catching the perspectives of the people. First, they had the Germans that are trying to take over the world, and then you had the Norwegians themselves, that they wanted to resist this occupation. And you could see the emotions that they're trying to figure out how to do that. And at the same time, they were trying to survive. And how do you put food on the table? And how far do you go along with them? And to what extent do you resist? Of course, you had the resistance fighters that were putting their lives at stake to actually do the resisting. And then you had the people that were actually running the factory. And they thought, well, okay, we'll just cooperate. We're just running a factory. And why do they need heavy water? We don't know. They had no idea. It was top secret why they even needed it. It was just a byproduct they were throwing in one of the local lakes there. It's just an isotope, heavier version of water that was used to control the atomic fusion there. And so, but as the Allies began learning what was going on, then they discovered this was in the development of the bomb. And they really had to figure out how to destroy this thing. And boy, the attempts for the resistance movement. Several attempts, some which were not successful, and then this thing was built like out of 12-foot thick concrete walls. I mean, in one of the attempts, the Americans said, "We'll just bomb the hell out of it," and they bombed it like crazy, and they hardly did anything to it.
Wow.
They had to come in from the inside and infiltrate it, and just the emotions of how people were trying to resist that occupation is so fascinating to me. I thought it was very, very well done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's can't really make a comment. Haven't seen it, but I'm interested in it. I saw that Phil mentioned Heroes of Telemark, which touches on the same story.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I have been to Norway and actually went there to do a story about the Norwegian resistance doing a gold, saving Norway's gold. So that's another interesting story. So there's
Well,
a
Bruce,
lot of stuff out of there.
I'll try to remember, Bruce, to post it on the site, but there's a book that just came out earlier this year about the Norwegian resistance, and that story gets
Would it be
into
this one, Chris?
No, it wouldn't
Okay,
be.
different book, but here's one book.
But I heard the author speak. It was very good. He talks a lot about the resistance up there, and
There was a
others might
lot
have an
going
interest.
on there, and I had family members that were both Danish and Norwegian that were part of that resistance, and they were conscripted by the Germans to try to teach the Germans how to do the cross-country skiing to keep up with the Scandinavian resistance people. I mean, and my mother, who was a young child, was asking her dad questions, and he'd say, "Be quiet, be quiet. The walls have ears," And
Wow.
the intrigue of when the government gets too strong, whether it's your own government or whether it's, in this case, an occupation government, people didn't know there were family members turning in family members because there were so many different views of what was the right thing to do. And this was filmed in Norway and in Czechoslovakia, but the Norwegian scenes were phenomenal. And that factory still lasts today because they couldn't bomb it. They couldn't destroy it. And it is a museum now to honor the resistance movement, because they finally did shut down and get rid of the heavy water, which prevented Nazis from developing the atomic bomb on a timely basis. And you also saw the nuclear scientist who was working on this nuclear fusions process. He didn't want to do it for the bomb. He was trying to do it to generate power for their, the fleets and for the factories and everything. But he realized these guys want it for the bomb, and now he was conflicted. Now I'm helping something I don't want to do.
Bruce, you didn't like this series, did you?
What a great segue.
No, it's a great movie, and you really owe it to yourself. The whole audience
You're making the sale, babe. We have an expression in our house: shoes in the box, right? We're all going to be watching Heavy Water tonight, but we got to make sure we have time for Terry Hirsch to tell us about a favorite. That Terry, you were not the only one. You feared you were the only one to select this one, but you were not the only one. So tell us about yours.
My favorite movie is White Christmas, and I know all about the singing and dancing, but it's about the song. I grew up in Chicago, and our local TV station WGN would air this every year, and our family would watch it. And my parents would take the time to share their feelings about this song, especially because they were separated during the war years. And then they would go on to tell us that years later, they would hear the song and it would bring back the memories, as songs normally do. But they also shared with us what they did during the war. That was our chance to talk to them about it and tell us stories. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that my parents weren't the ones that really tied the song and the war together. It was kind of universal. But it really set up a vehicle for my parents to become, I guess, my first World War II tour guides. They really got me interested in it. The other thing about the movie that I really liked was Women in Uniform. It's during a particular song, I Wish I Was Back in the Army Now, and the two female leads come out and they're dressed in military uniforms. Well, my dad didn't ever talk about women in the military. He didn't see them where he was stationed. And my mom wasn't Rosie the Riveter. She was doing something else. And I just didn't realize women were in the military itself. So that gave me an eye to the WASP, the SPAR, the WACS, the Marines, and I'm missing somebody, the Waves. So that's when it all started. So it was kind of an education at the same time. And I still watch it today and get to think about all the places I've learned about and places I've gone. And it was my parents that pretty much started it.
Well, Terry, I don't know if you ever get a chance to, but if you ever do, walking through the Bois Jacques in December, that song will immediately pop into your head. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
I have been there, but that song didn't pop into my mind.
Oh, every time I go to the Bois Jacques, I hear that song.
Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing with us some wonderful Homefront movies. And Chris, do you have a Homefront movie you want to share?
Best years of their lives.
There you go. I think Mrs. Miniver would be mine. I just saw it recently, and I really liked it. So I'm gonna duck in safely behind.
Well, when you come to visit me,
behind
Rick,
Deanne on that one.
we can look at my little punt. It's out here by the front.
Entire
Just look
thing
up.
was shot in the studio in Los Angeles, but it's okay.
My boat is right here, though. We can go. Sorry.
Very good. Just as long as you don't have any Nazi pilots hanging around. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to let you go, but appreciate it. And but before I let you go, I do just want to add the comment here from Marilyn saying, as we all feel, Bruce, thank you so much for your insights on heavy water and introducing us to that. So thank you. All right, so we're going to see if we can move on. We're running slightly behind schedule, but not too badly, everybody. If you can hang on. This is a pretty interesting show, I got to say. So you should stick with us. And Chris, our next category. Oh, and there's Bruce is still there. Bruce, I'm sorry, I got to let you go. Yeah, you're gone, Bruce. It's not happening anymore. So. How are we doing, Chris? Are we okay? I need to. I have the big beer. I need to pour a little bit more of it.
Okay.
A little bit more. I didn't. I was thinking. I don't think Downfall is a Homefront movie.
Well, I was thinking that the problem with this is there are so many categories. So I was thinking about a whole subcategory of the Third Reich and occupation, and of course Holocaust movies, and then you have the whole subgenre of series. So we might have to do a follow-up show.
Yeah, I think, or
people like,
or perhaps we'll just change the whole format of History Happy Hour and do this every week, but probably not. So, all right. Well, our next category here is, if I can keep my head about me, is called "Look Up in the Air," and it's about movies that have planes in them. Okay, let's just pretty simple here, and let's see who we're bringing on. So we're bringing on Neil. And we're bringing on Daniel and Linda. I saw Linda here, and who am I missing? Stephen Preston. I don't see Stephen here in the window. So Stephen, if you're trying to get in, give us a ring. But I'm going to start here. I have to say that two of the people joining us here, Linda and Neil, have the same first choice movie, and then their second choice movie, or at least for one of them, is the same as Daniel's first choice movie. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about two movies primarily here. But Linda Griffith, why don't you, coming in there from Rockville, Maryland, or wherever you are, why don't you start us out with your favorite Look Up in the Air war movie?
Okay, great, thanks. So I picked this movie for two reasons. First, I thought it had a great deal of historical accuracy. It's based on real events and individuals. And second, I like the main themes of leadership and teamwork.
And the movie, you have to tell us what the movie is. I haven't said.
Oh, sorry. 12 O'Clock High.
There you go.
Yes, 12 O'Clock High, 1949, directed by Daryl Zanuck. So as to the historic aspect, it raised the U.S. 8th Air Force in the fall of 1942 as they planned and attempted to establish this daylight precision bombing campaign. It presents this in a very straightforward manner. It's not really embellished. They're not even sure during the film if they're successful or if they will ultimately be successful. The 306th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force served as for the most of the movie. The current included Iowa Eagle.
Having a few audio problems with you, Linda, but we're
Sorry.
just no, it's not your fault. But keep going. I think we've got it fixed here.
The Air Force provided equipment and uniforms And lastly, there are 12 airworthy B-17 flying fortresses. As to the main themes of the movie, I thought it presented very well the challenge of leadership at all levels, including Bomber Command by Wickham, bomb group at the fictional Archbury Air Base, and for each of the 10-man B-17 crews. And it showed very well the need for teamwork at all of these levels.
Well, and I'm going to jump in, and I'm sure Neil is going, what am I going to say now? Because I know that Neil also...
But we can see Neil now, because when I saw last time, Neil just was the voice of God. He was a pulsing beat.
Right. I know that Neil's also a fan and a pilot, and I'm guessing from the conversation we had on Friday, a former military pilot. But Neil, tell us your thoughts on this movie, different or the same as Linda's.
Well, I would like to echo Linda's comments. She put them very well. And for me, simply put, it's just a great movie, made well in black and white about World War II aviation. And certainly who doesn't like World War II aviation?
Everyone should. Yeah.
And it's about the early days of the bomber campaign before the advent of long-range fighter escort. So while later in the war, when the fighter escort was there, they could handle the German fighters as they came up. These bomber guys still had to go through the flak, and they flew straight and level, 150 miles an hour. They couldn't jink, they couldn't vary their altitude, and they had to take whatever was given to them. But with this movie, I was hooked from the very beginning. The opening scenes with in post-war London, when the now retired Major Stovall goes to the antique store, finds the Toby mug, realizes what it is, then bicycles out to the airfield, and then suddenly the flashback, and you can hear the wonderful sound of those Wright Cyclone engines, the deep throaty roar of those radial engines coming towards you. So it's a fantastic movie. And as stated, it's based on real events, bombing campaign. I believe it was the bombing campaign to Schweitfurt. And
it always comes down to the ball bearings, right?
It does.
Ball bearings, yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that's interesting about that movie, and I know, Daniel, that was also your second choice movie, so we'll give you a chance to chime in as well, but is how little of it is actually taking place in the airplane. And how much of it involves kind of the psychology of command and of the pilots. There's a pilot who's awarded a Medal of Honor who then wants to quit. There's somebody who kills themselves. There's somebody who develops a kind of a paralysis and can't enter the airplane to go on the big fateful mission. And I think, you know, that's stuff that probably was pretty gritty for people in 1949 when that movie was made.
Well, I think it's interesting.
It deals very well with the element of fear and how they managed fear and the consequences of that.
Well, one of the things I thought was really interesting getting ready for this show and looking back on the dates that all these movies are coming out, there are all these movies coming out just at the end of the war that are really dealing with some pretty weighty things, PTSD and camaraderie and all these subjects that you don't think about when the whole idea of the good war happens and we went out to beat the Hun and all this sort of stuff. But, you know, right at the end of the war, they're dealing with some pretty hefty stuff because, of course, the veterans are the people that are going back and watching these movies.
Yeah.
Yes, and the veterans found this to be fairly realistic. It was something that they said really documented their experiences very well.
Daniel, you have some interest in that movie, but in another movie as well. So I'll let you decide which one to talk about first. But you can go for it.
Just to butt in on what Chris was saying before, saying about how all these movies are coming out right after the movie. Well, my favorite movie comes out in 1990, so not right after the movie, and it's Memphis Belle. And whereas Linda really did a really good job of explaining 12 O'Clock High, everything that 12 O'Clock High was, Memphis Belle was not. In fact, Memphis Belle was a movie about a documentary about the wrong airplane. In fact, if you actually follow the movie's byline and how they go to Bremen and how they bomb Bremen, that was actually for the original topic of the documentary, was a B-17 called Invasion the Second, which was shot down over Bremen on its 24th mission. And it's so basically the reason why I chose Memphis Belle, which was in fact the second B-17 to complete its 25 missions. Hell's Angels was the first that did it 2 weeks before Memphis Belle. Is that it was Genesis for me. Well, I was 13 in 1990, and for me, before that, aircraft was just aircraft. And if it wasn't Top Gun, it was really nothing. I loved all airplanes, but it was never really about the history, never really about how it all began and how it all developed and how everything came about. And Memphis Belle really changed that. I really loved the emotional aspect. Like the thing that stands out to me the most is the navigator who got drunk before the mission and is standing out in the front of the B-17 and basically crying, saying, "I don't want to die." He's very, very certain he's going to go out and meet his maker on this next mission. And it was a very powerful moment. And I really thought that really kind of typified what might have been the inner monologue of a lot of flight crews going out on these big missions. They may not have gotten drunk and going out crying in front of their airplanes, but that really stuck out to me. But for me, it was Genesis. And it also kind of brought about, for lack of a better word, my cynical side. Whereas as a 13-year-old, I decided, well, okay, so this is Hollywood. What was real? What was true? So I started research. Started the research on what actually went on. The Memphis Belle, the real Memphis Belle mission, was a milk run over France that was set up perfectly for the movie. A collection of the damage that happened to the B-17 in the movie was a myriad of different collection of damage that happened to many other different B-17s. I really enjoyed the digging into it, and plus I got to see a bunch of actors that where some of them were just as they were getting to be popular, like Sean Astin before he was Samwise Gamgee, and after he was in the Goonies was in this movie. And it was just a fun movie for me. I really enjoyed it.
Well, everybody, I feel like my job is to introduce you and then make you leave.
Remember, that was Rick's doing. Yeah.
Right. All the cool stuff is Chris, and all the mean stuff is Rick. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to let you guys go, but thank you so much for sharing, and two fun movies to watch for sure. And so thank you so much for being here with us to talk about them. Bye,
Thanks,
Linda.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a nice remainder of the day.
Which I'm trying. As long as I fail to watch TV news, I'll be fine. So we are. Let's see where we are here. We are moving on to our fourth section, our fourth topic area, Chris, which I want to say you came up with a great title, which is the title of also of a British TV series, which I've seen every episode of.
Oh, I didn't know. All right.
There you go. So I am totally a fan. And we're going to bring on Wally here. And I don't see Lynn. So Lynn, if you're trying to reach us, keep trying, and we'll try to bring you in. But failing that, we'll try to talk about your movie a little bit, even without
talk about you.
I have a lot of stories.
Or talk about you. But And I see Lynn is trying to connect, so hopefully we'll be able to bring him on. And so, so go ahead. Our topic area here is Death in Paradise. So it's the war in the Pacific. So loosely speaking, and there's Lynn. So Lynn, you made it. We're adding you to the stream. And they've got us beat on the facial hair front, Chris, for sure. I know. I think we're just real.
For me, it's the COVID project.
I like it though.
There you go. And so yeah, go ahead. Tell Wallace. Wallace or Wally?
No, Wally. I go by Wally, but you know, when I
okay.
have to sign a check, I use my formal name.
You feel free to write any checks you wish to me.
Okay.
Wally, and go ahead and give us your selection and why.
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we got you.
Yes.
So my favorite movie is Home of the Brave. It's a 1949 film, and you know, this is it's a war story, but it also explores race relationships in those times, and it's a psychodrama. And it's a story of forgiveness. It's a story of love. It's a story of friendship, some more genuine than others. It's a story of bravery. It's a story of forgiveness and redemption. I mean, it's got it all. It really packs an emotional punch. It's about the main characters are a black soldier and a white soldier that are boyhood friends, and they grow up in a time they're friends despite the segregated world that they live in, and they graduate from high school, and then the next time they see each other, they're assigned to a reconnaissance mission in the South Pacific. They're going to go reconnoiter an island that is later going to be invaded, and so it's about and the black guy and his white friend are you know, they're best of friends, one would think, but then you know, nobody else in the platoon that's there with them, or the reconnaissance group, wants the black guy there. I mean, it is pretty raw stuff for 1949, and this is all in the backdrop of Truman having desegregated the military in 1948. And I saw this movie as a kid. You know, I was born in 47. I remember that, Lynn. I was born in 47, and we didn't have my folks couldn't afford a TV for years. So I would guess I saw this when I was probably 9 or 10 years old for the first time in the mid 1950s. But it's stuck with me ever since.
Well, you know, and it's interesting because, again, it's the same year as 12 O'Clock High. It's 1949. It's what Chris was saying. That it's almost as if, you know, you have this 5 years afterwards, you have this, you're close enough to be realistic, but far enough away to kind of deal with the true facts, or to deal with sort of the harsher themes, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty raw. I mean, the language is rough, you know, sort of banned by today's society. The N-word is used excessively by both the black soldier and the white soldiers. But it is a beautiful story of redemption, and it really introduces an incredible actor who did a handful of movies, and I don't know what happened to him, this James Edward, who plays the black soldier, Peter Moss. And he really opened the door, I think, for other leading black actors like Sidney Poitier and Woody Strode and Harry Belafonte. Just really pushed the door open for those guys. But he gets no credit. I mean, he's like the unknown black pioneer in Hollywood.
Well, Chris, did you want to? Am I interrupting you?
No, I was doing that suggestive lean in, you know, towards you.
Okay, Lynn, we're both going to lean in towards Lynn.
Yeah, well,
and say, tell us about yours.
Well, just one comment for Wally's first. The actor died at age 50, very young.
Yeah, that seems young to us now, for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, I didn't know
mine
that.
Yeah, my movie was. See, I just had a senior moment. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah, I'll give you a hand.
Would you like us to help you?
I'll give you a hand
please.
there.
Yeah,
visual aid. Visual aid.
They were expendable. Anyway,
lucky guess.
Yeah, lucky guess. Released in 45, filmed in Florida using a lot of naval assets, based on a story from 1942 that was fictionalized account of PT boats in the Philippines. It starts at the very couple days before the war, goes into the chaos of the opening days of the war in the Philippines, and how people were trying to cope with very little, fighting the Japanese that were much stronger forces than these PT boats could put out, and the sacrifices these men were making. And toward the end, I mean, you have the people trying to get out, and they are able to get a few people out, but not everybody. And you know that the ones who didn't get out most likely did not even make it at all. And the final scenes are the sailors walking down the beach by themselves, pretty much knowing that there's, I won't say no hope, because they had hope, but they knew what they were facing, but they still fought on. A very strong character type, and at the end of the war, bringing up still patriotism and, I guess we might say, old-fashioned American values, good values. So that was a lot of the movie. The backstory is that the screenplay was done by Frank Spigweed, who was an early pioneer of naval aviation, and until 1926, when he fell downstairs and broke his back. Thereafter, he still fought hard for naval aviation, putting out a lot of books and tracts and articles and magazines, and eventually he was able to see these new carriers coming off the ways. He walked with sticks, walking sticks, because of his broken back, but he finagled his way onto a carrier during the Pacific. So it was wow. He was writing this screenplay from that point of view of being a naval guy. And in 1956, I think it was, John Wayne played Spigweed in a movie called Wings of Eagles.
I'm going to move that toe. Remember that? One of the greatest lines.
I'm going to move that toe.
I'm going to move that toe.
I'm going to move that toe.
That is a force of determination.
It was, and but he died. He was dead by this time. He died in 1947. We did so, but Wally, earlier we talked about this, and he wanted to know why Robert Montgomery was the lead. Well, because he already had a couple of Academy Award nominations, and he was the lieutenant commander during the war, and he was aboard a destroyer at Normandy, and he actually met one of the characters, one of the main.
Johnny Buckley, right?
Yes, he did, who was the Medal of Honor winner out of this. So there was a lot of tie-in here. And John Ford was the director, and he had a lot of war experiences as a photographer, so he had been there and seen a lot of things. But during the filming, Ford fell and broke his leg. Mm-hmm. So Robert Montgomery took over the directing. And so he had a lot of Navy people involved in this, which I thought was very good. But like I said, end of the war, carrying through still patriotism through there.
Well, yeah, it is a very moving, especially at the end, movie. As you pointed out, when they're leaving the other guys behind there on Corregidor or wherever that is.
Well, and let's not also forget that PT boats are just sexy.
Well, and isn't it true that so many war movies involve so many war movies involve the auxiliary units, right? That are on the fringe, that are doing something interesting, as opposed to the poor people who are right there in the tip of the actual spear.
And let me just say that any movie with Donna Reed is worth watching.
There you go. Absolutely.
Okay. Side note: Robert Montgomery, which I did not know until I was looking up, is the father of Elizabeth Montgomery.
Oh. Well, I did not. I should have known that. Marilyn knew that. I don't know that.
Yeah.
So, guys, I want to just say, Lynn and Wally, that clearly, if Chris and I ever need another vacation week, you're the ones to take over the show. So,
well, only if Wally writes me that check.
Yes, exactly. Wallace, write the check for me too. So
yeah, well, I'll keep toasting Ghost Army, and we'll go on there. I know the
drill.
Okay.
I
know what to do. All right, there we go.
Here we go. September.
All right, cheers to you guys.
Scotch. So, but
never
happy
too
New
late.
Year.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
All right, guys. All right. So we're running a little bit behind schedule, but we're entering the home stretch here. So please stay with us.
Stay with us.
We have a great viewership so far, and the show's only getting better as it goes along. So, our second to last category here is called "Wait, There Were Other Wars." Because, yes, in fact, there were other wars than World War II, and I know this is rocking our audience's world, but, and we did have a few people who came up with suggestions, and a couple of them couldn't make it today, and we hope that they're doing okay. Sean, we hope you're doing okay out there, and Doreen. But we do have Kathy Hurst is here to join us to talk about a movie on this subject. Kathy, how are you?
Hi,
I'm
Kathy.
good. I'm good.
And I am just going to put it out there. I think the audience may know this already, that Kathy is my sister. And so I just have to defer to her in everything because she's my slightly older sister.
Well played, Red.
Okay.
Well, you can tell by the degree of gray hair is the
Which he did
measure
to you.
there.
Which he did to you, no doubt.
I gave her those gray hairs with my aberrant behavior. But Kathy, we're in a topic of movies other than World War II, and many of us didn't even know there were such movies. So tell us about your choice in that category.
Well, I nominated 4 movies, and 3 of them were in the non-World War II category. So
Bold.
clearly that's where I was going. But I nominated Last of the Mohicans, which was a 1992 film. Oh, great graphic. And it was about the French and Indian Wars, and particularly about a siege of a fort near the U.S.-Canadian border in the summer of 1757. And it stars Daniel Day-Lewis and incredible acting. I mean, you probably know about this film that he did an amazing amount of preparation, as he does for all his films. He learned how to hunt and trap and how to shoot a musket with one hand and, I don't know, skin a rabbit with the other. And
Did he teach that eventually to Mel Gibson, who needed that skill for Patriot?
Must have. And also how to shoot on the run and run through the forest and all of that. But also fabulous music. I bought the CD after this music, and I still listen to a lot of the music from this show, and really amazing cinematography. And as when we talked about this ahead of time, I said that the things that I'm looking for in a film are acting, cinematography, music, and authenticity of one sort or another. But I think this film stands up historically pretty well also. And I watched it just again this week, since I hadn't seen it in quite a long time. And I really felt it held up as a movie, that it really was still an effective and moving movie. And I think that it was really lauded at the time for its authenticity in dealing with the Native American characters. They used Native actors, although many of them were First Nations Canadian people, and that the props and the settings were really authentic. The director spent $1 million in 1992 building that fort replica, which is a lot of money. And he really built everything out of authentic materials and really tried to tell the story accurately. I think that the thing that I liked about it particularly was it showed the complexities of war, how knowing which side you're on isn't always easy, and also, to me, answering the question a little bit, what are we fighting for? So those are the reasons I enjoyed it.
We're fighting for the Empire.
Whichever that is, the French Empire or the British Empire.
No, the good one, the one with the pink bits on the map. That's right.
Well, it's based on a book by Hawthorne, right? Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Yeah.
No,
Cooper.
James
Fenimore Cooper. Woo, wrong, Rick, wrong. James.
That's why I was an English major. So that's,
I did read the Natty Bumppo books as a kid, because he's Natty Bumppo in the books. I guess they decided Bumpo wasn't going to work in the movie, so he's
clearly
Nathaniel
you didn't pay
Poe.
attention though, and you do.
Yeah, I didn't. Failure. I mean, it's a total failure there, but it is an excellent movie, and I think what I haven't seen it in a long time, but what I really remember is his performance, and it always seems true of Daniel Day-Lewis, whether it's playing. Deerstalker there, or playing Abraham Lincoln, that he just envelops himself in the role.
Well, it's one of the reasons he does relatively few movies, because it's such an exhausting process for him that he does a lot of prep, and he likes to live in his role. When he did that movie about the the disabled guy, Christy, My Left Foot, that movie.
Okay, right.
He apparently stayed in a wheelchair the entire time that they were filming, so that he would have to kind of know what it was like to be a disabled man living in that kind of world. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff he does. It's exhausting. You can see that it would be exhausting.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's a pretty interesting time when before the colonists wised up and realized that hanging out with the British was a bad idea.
Excuse me. Au contraire, mon frère.
Was one of the other movies you suggested Glory? I'm trying to remember.
No,
Kathy.
I nominated
what else did you come up with?
Dr. Zhivago
Right.
and Good Morning Vietnam.
Yep.
And Saving Private Ryan. Those were mine.
And one of the characters, by the way, in Dr. Zhivago, who plays a young kind of revolutionary figure, in Dr. Zhivago plays an old postman in the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. So there's definitely a connection between those films. So Kathy Hurst, thank you so much for filling us up in this segment. And
you're very welcome, and I'm pleased to represent the non-World War II.
You
movies.
represent every movie ever made about war that is not World War II. It is you. It's on you.
I'm getting beaten down because my shoulders are so laden. So.
But well done, well done.
Okay,
all right,
thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy the show.
Thank you. Enjoy the show, she said. I love that. I always enjoy the show.
I'm sure you do.
And somebody asked about Civil War, and we did have somebody who suggested Glory as a movie, and obviously not everybody who suggested things was able to come on and join us. We had another suggestion from Sean, who was not able to join us, who suggested The Killing Fields, which is a really powerful movie. And we've had many other suggestions in the comments area. But Chris, I guess it is kind of a time for the last segment here, which is now for something completely different. And I guess this is where we have to kind of lay it on the line.
Ooh,
with
well,
something.
You first.
With something, Well, okay. I mean, it's really hard because, first of all, there's a whole bunch of movies I was surprised that nobody brought up that are wonderful movies. Das Boot, which is a great movie. Inglourious Bastards, which may not be completely historical.
Which is a wretched, awful movie.
But there you go. But a lot of people like it. All Quiet on the Western Front, which is, I saw a theater production of that last year that blew me away, but a great movie. My choice is a movie that I have known about since I was a kid, and I think some other people have put that up here too. And it's that's the wrong one. I almost picked the wrong one. Wow, that would have really nailed things. But it's Mr. Roberts, and it's the story. I imagine most of you have seen it. It's the story that takes place on basically a freighter, a Navy supply ship in the Pacific, with Henry Fonda and James Cagney and Jack Lemmon. Great performances. But what I like about it is that, it's the movie that introduced me to the idea that there was something other than the fighting front, that there were a bunch of people involved in trying to do stuff that was ultimately kind of boring. I mean, they're sailing, as they say, from tedium to apathy and back again, but who are nevertheless important to the war effort. And there's a lot in there about sort of the petty power politics and relationships and stuff. And I always found that was a very moving movie to me. And when Henry Fonda spins around and marches up and walks up the gangplank and throws the captain's palm tree over, it gets me every time.
Gets you every time.
Gets me every time. So that is, for me, despite many other movies that I like, Mr. Roberts, and I got to say, a lot of the movies that I like that are war movies are in some fashion or another anti-war movies, because it's that sense of it, like this is there's a lot here that doesn't make sense. So that's mine. And what about yours?
Well, everybody knows already.
Well, I was up fast. They're not that fast at reading.
Okay. Well, as people who've traveled with me before know, we watch a lot of movies on the bus, talk about a lot of history. But if I could only take one war movie to a desert island with me, it would be Kelly's Heroes. And
I tried to watch that movie. I was unable to do
Oh.
so.
It's a Mother Beautiful movie.
It's a Mother Beautiful movie?
Well, if you made it to the end of the movie, they say it's a Mother Beautiful tank, but it's not. It's a Mother Beautiful movie.
I think I might have made it. I might
So,
have fallen
so
asleep.
what
I'm not sure.
so obviously people know the plot. It's a bunch of Americans go rogue, get behind German lines.
Americans?
Yes.
Go rogue?
Go rogue.
Unbelievable.
Has a great cast, but they break through German lines, get ahead of the advancing American army, rob a bank, do the mission for themselves, and ride off into the sunset. So, what drew me to it first, when I was very young, was for the time, for 1970, it was the first movie I saw that tried to portray the material culture of war accurately, not the war itself, but the uniforms are by and large right. The fact that they tried to make a German tank for a young teenage boy building tank models, I was like, wow, that's amazing.
That must have been one of the things that just killed you about Patton.
Don't even get me started. You gotta keep bringing up that.
I'm sorry, because I know all the tanks were wrong in Patton. So
everything was
famously
wrong in Patton.
Famously wrong.
Everything was wrong in Patton. But anyway, so that really impressed me. Just the material culture of it, the fact that the Germans spoke German, that got me. And then I stopped really watching the movie and started getting interested in more authentic movies or more realistic movies. And now that I'm older and I find it hard to watch most war movies now. I still come back to it because it's ridiculous, and they don't try to make it a realistic war movie because it's not, and you can't.
No.
And so if you can separate that out from it, it's amusing. The cast is great. It says an awful lot more about the Vietnam War than it does about World War II, and it's just fun. And I like how they all ride the trucks off into the sunset.
I'm getting some harsh criticism here from Jean here.
Thank
she
you.
says I'm sending out negative waves.
You are.
Oh, wait a minute! But there's this negative waves. Doreen is talking about. There goes Rick with the negative waves. Wow.
See,
Brian, again with. I've never even heard the phrase "negative waves." And
that's so. When you say you tried to watch the movie and couldn't, you get like 5
with it. I think
you got like
your
5
fan club
minutes
is
into
speaking. It's great that you have a small minority of fanatic fans. So I'm happy for you, Chris. But thanks. And there's no Mr. Roberts fans out there. Well, that's just fine.
What does that say then?
It means people should go watch the Ghost Army. So.
Look at that! What a cheap plug.
Chris, what have we got coming up next week? Is it? I'm hoping it's this topic because if it's not, then I'm not prepared for it.
Yeah, it's. I'm looking forward to this. It's the crowning crisis. It's about the abdication crisis of Edward VIII just before World War II, which of course brings George VI onto the throne. There's been lots that's been written about it. But mostly from the standpoint of the love story between Edward and Wallace Simpson. There's been many docudramas made about it. I know Rick gets very giddy when he talks about Edward and Wallace and love. He's a big Royals watcher, for those of you who don't know.
Absolutely.
But this is this is a good study of the history behind it and why it was important and why it matters to British constitutional history and the history of the Second World War. So,
well, and I certainly don't want to bring any more negative waves to anything.
Thank you.
And not that you ever have brought any negative waves
never.
to anything.
I'm the glasses half full guy on this.
What is it filled with, though? No, it should be a really interesting show, and there's some really interesting politics involved with that, both with Winston Churchill involved with that, with the king who would have been Edward VII involved, Edward VIII involved with some Nazi rumored Nazi things, and a lot of issues there. But I really look forward to diving into that and learning more about that. But mostly right now, I do want to thank all of the brave souls who volunteered to come on under the harsh light of questioning on History Happy Hour and bare their souls about their favorite movies. And everybody who watched and who made many comments, I couldn't put them all on the screen, but there were tons of interesting suggestions and great comments. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I want to say that we kind of tried this on a dare or see what happens. So if you liked it, let us know. If there are other topics or other ways that you'd like to approach this, let us know, because we really did this because this gave us a chance to see you guys. And I just wanted to say, kind of the last official show sort of last year or first one of this year. Speaking personally, I couldn't have gotten through the lockdown and all this craziness without doing the show and having all of my friends, you guys, with me through all of it. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank you for giving us a chance to have you on the show, and we hope we can do something else like that soon.
I totally agree. I sent positive waves on that. And if you do want to get in touch with us to make a suggestion, as Chris suggested, or tell us what you thought of this show, or tell us what you think about anything, that's the email address to send it to, hhh@stephenambrosetours.com. Thanks, everybody, for joining History Happy Hour.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.